Welcome back to the channel. Today it's our team selection for Game Week 21, a week where lots of choices need to be made. To begin with, between the sticks, I've gone with Kepa from Chelsea for his away fixture against Liverpool. Kepa returned an impressive 10 points last week against Crystal Palace, although I expect him to have a tougher test this time round. It really is a toss-up this week between playing Kepa or playing Ward at home to Brighton. I actually think I prefer Chelsea's away trip to Anfield, because just of late, Liverpool have struggled to score goals, and this game may create lots of saving opportunities for the Chelsea keeper. To kick off in defence, it's Kieran Trippier for Newcastle's away game against Crystal Palace. Since the Premier League restarted in December, Palace have struggled to score goals, while Newcastle haven't conceded a single goal in that time. Trippier showed again last weekend why he's just such an important player to own in FPL, and if you don't own him, he'll punish your rank. With the way that Palace have been performing, you'd have to say that this away fixture is arguably more appealing for Newcastle than their home game against Fulham last week. Trippier is just such good value for money in the game, and I wouldn't be surprised if next season they priced him at 7 million or above. We're going with the double up on Newcastle in defence, and it's Dan Burn against Crystal Palace. At 4.5 million, Burn has been tremendous value for money since I brought him in back in Game Week 17. Eddie Howe has played the same back line since Game Week 9, so for now at least, it seems that Burn has cemented his place at left back. Newcastle were perhaps fortunate not to concede a goal last week against Fulham, with Mitrovic's freak penalty. But other than that moment, Fulham didn't create too much in terms of goal scoring opportunities, and I expect a similar situation with Palace this week. Finally, in our three-man defence is Gabriel for Arsenal's home game against Man United. United are still the only team to beat Arsenal so far in the league this season, and this will obviously be a tough game from a defensive point of view. That being said, Arsenal defended well against Spurs last week, and they've been putting up some of the best defensive stats in the league this season. I haven't really got a viable option to play in place of Gabriel this week, so he makes the starting 11. Of course, there's always the odd chance of a goal from a set piece, which would be a nice bonus. I never really like doing this, but I'm playing an attacker versus a defender this week, and it's Marcus Rashford for the Arsenal game. Ever since the Premier League resumed in December, Rashford has been one of the most informed players, and he looks to be a real bargain at 7.1 million. Other than the match where he slept in, Rashford seems to be nailed for 90 minutes, either playing an advanced left wing position or up front as a number 9. This will obviously be a tough game for United, but they've shown before that they're capable of beating Arsenal. Let's see if they can do it this time round away from home. Next up is Almiron for Newcastle's away trip to Crystal Palace. Almiron was on phenomenal form heading into the World Cup, but since its conclusion, he hasn't quite delivered the same output in the Premier League. Although his returns have dried up, Newcastle still look good in attacking positions and were unlucky not to score more goals against the likes of Leeds and Fulham. With his next three fixtures against Palace, West Ham and Bournemouth, I fully expect Almiron to get back on the score sheet. The only question is whether to bring in another player in his place, considering the myriad of midfielders in FPL this season. My gut tells me to stick with him at the moment. Joining Almiron is Son for Tottenham's away match against Fulham. Game Week 20 hasn't yet concluded, and Spurs were disappointing against a very strong looking Arsenal. Apart from a couple of good chances, Son was virtually absent in that game, and I honestly worry that soon he might be dropped. At the time of filming, it looks like Son was a bad transfer in, but one silver lining is that his price allows me to bring in almost any midfielder in his place. However, Fulham usually play quite offensive football at home, and this type of game will favour the likes of Kane and Son. Something tells me that it's sensible to play Son this week and hold 2 free transfers going into Game Week 22. The next player I've gone for in midfield is Kevin De Bruyne for Man City's home game against Wolves. On paper, you would have to say that this is the type of fixture that De Bruyne would usually flourish in, but since the restart, he's barely returned any FPL points. Although we're yet to know how De Bruyne gets on against Spurs on Thursday, I think he's a sensible hold this week, because City will have to put out their strongest team moving forwards, if indeed Pep does want to challenge for the Premier League title. To add to this, Man City will also have a double game week in just a couple of weeks' time. The final player in the midfield this week is Mitoma for Brighton's away match versus Leicester. I'm over the moon to be owning Mitoma, whilst he's still such a differential in FPL. I watched Brighton against Liverpool and they created so many chances. Mitoma was unfortunate to return just a single assist. Since the 22-23 season began, Leicester have put up some of the worst defensive stats, and that form has continued since the Premier League restart. At the moment, Brighton forward players offer such great value for money in FPL, and it's just a question of which one you think will return the most points moving forwards. First up front this week is Mitrovic against Tottenham. Fulham performed well against Newcastle last weekend and were unlucky not to pick up something from that game. Mitrovic was really unfortunate to slip during his penalty and kick the ball against his standing foot, resulting in an indirect free kick. Hopefully Marco Silva will see it as a genuine slip-up and not take Mitrovic off of penalty duties. At the moment, Spurs are looking fairly unstable at the back, and Fulham are looking threatening going forward. I think Mitrovic definitely has the potential of scoring big this week. It's just a question of whether to play him over Adams, who's currently on the bench. The final man to make the team this week is of course Erling Haaland for City's home game against Wolves. Many fantasy managers decided to triple captain Haaland for City's double game week against Man United and Spurs, and so far it hasn't paid off. Although Haaland and City as a whole haven't been their dominant selves since the Premier League returned, you wouldn't put it past them to turn up in any game and put 3 to 4 goals past their opponents. Wolves will likely play ultra defensive in this game, and that could work into the hands of players like Haaland. I would expect a home win in this game, which means that making the bench this week is Ward, Che Adams, Perrault and Patterson. Although there are a catalogue of exciting players I could bring in this week, the plan at the moment is to roll the transfer and take 2 free transfers into Game Week 22. With a potential blank Game Week 25 on the horizon, and likely double game weeks in the upcoming weeks, I think it's a smart move to be able to be flexible and respond accordingly when those weeks arrive. 2 free transfers will allow me to do just that. I'm not set yet on captaincy this week. At the moment it's on Haaland, but I must be honest, I am seriously tempted by a differential captain like Mitoma this week. This will likely be a decision I make closer to the deadline. I'll make sure to keep you guys updated with any final changes I make on the community tab on my channel. As always, thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't done already, make sure to check out my differential 11 team for Game Week 21, where you can win yourself a channel shout out. I really hope to see you there.